Welcome back to the Intuition Incubator. Incubators, today I have with me Rollin McCraty. He is the Director of Research of HeartMath Research Center at the HeartMath Institute. As a psychophysiologist, Dr. McCraty's research interests include the physiology of emotion, heart-brain communication, and the global interconnectivity between people and the Earth's energetic systems. He's been featured in a number of documentary films such as I Am, The Truth, The Power of the Heart, Solar Revolution, The Way of the Miracles, Cosmic Sentience, The One Field, Sacred Journey of the Heart, Rescued Hearts, and The Living Matrix, among many others. There's a lot more to his bio that I cannot pronounce, so we're just going to jump right in. Welcome, Dr. McCraty.
Hey, Abby, it's great to be here. One of my favorite topics.
Yes, I know. And, it's really one of the modules that I love teaching the most is the one on intuition. But before we talk about that, tell me about, I'm just curious because I have a whole keynote that I talk about I Am, and you were in this documentary called I Am. Can you say something about that?
Oh, wow. That one's a long time ago. Tom Shadyac. That, I don't know what you want to, well, the thing I remember most, it was actually one of the most publicly promoted documentaries I've been in. It was on Oprah and all kinds of things, given Tom's history as a very famous producer in Hollywood. And his story, the part that I always remember from it, was the yogurt experiment that was in that film where we electroded. I don't know if you remember, saw the film or not. We put electrodes in yogurt, and he promised me. So he had heard about it and wanted to do it, and he said, "Promised me it wouldn't be in the film." Because I didn't particularly want it, to be.
You didn't want it in the film?
No, I didn't necessarily want to be known. This is quite a few years ago at time for that, because we're published in major journals and all that.
Right.
It's kind of out there. These days, who cares? But anyway, so we went downstairs in the lower lab and hooked up a couple electrodes in a petri dish with yogurt in it, bacteria in yogurt, and and I'm kind of talking about what we're doing, and I asked him, I said, "Well, how's your relationship with your wife right now?" And the meter that's hooked up to the yogurt just pegs out and goes crazy, and he turns red. And so I then discovered that he's going through a not so nice divorce.
Oh my gosh.
And so the yogurt just way responded. And not only did it make it in the movie, it was in all the trailers for the movie, that was all over everywhere. I mean, it was very well promoted. So anyway, I learned my lesson there. But in hindsight, it was really good that it was, because, I still get people contacting me today. And how did you do that? And what's the instruments you need? And,
right.
I actually want to develop a more user-friendly version of that. I know it works, so that it could be used in classrooms for help students learn about how their emotions and the fields we radiate do interact with other living systems in a measurable way as an educational tool.
Yeah, educationally, like how amazing would it be if we had this in all of the education systems? I'm sure you have a gazillion stories, and I even have stories of having taught teachers who then come back and say, I use this with the kids and it, just changed everything. It's pretty amazing. Tell us though, let's just start I'd love just to get you a little background about your history, like how you got interested in this, how you started down this path, like what happened? How'd you get here?
Well, that's kind of a long story, but I don't want to take too much time with it. But the real answer is personal experience. That I'd gotten. My original career was electrical engineering, communication engineering. I used to work for Motorola and all that. And always, I guess I just have a curious spirit. I was always wanting to know what is a magnetic field or gravity and these kind of things, and would ask professors. And here's the formula. No, I got that. That describes its behavior. What is it? Go away. Don't ask that. They were nice. Well, maybe not that much nicer about it, but that was kind of the message. Anyway, that led me, I found a book in a bookshop in University of Nebraska, actually, is where that was, that started having some hints at those deeper questions. And that very long story short, I ended up moving to California and got to get a degree in consciousness type studies. This is back in the 70s, and there wasn't a lot. Wasn't like it is now. An actual degree granting.
Yeah.
So they did that. and trying to think how to tell this story in a short form here.
It's okay.
Ended up getting involved with a group that brought spirulina to the world and set up and ran one of the companies in that,
Oh,
and which had a humanitarian motive behind it, a system to feed the world's hungry population. And actually, National Enquirer I was somewhat involved in setting that up. A front page article on, I'll never forget the headline, Doctors Praise Safe New Diet Pill. Lose weight and never be hungry again.
for spirulina?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And in the next 2-3 week period in the company I was running for that sold through health food stores, I wrote about $20 million in business.
Oh my gosh.
The power back then of these supermarket drag magazines as we think of them.
Not very conscious though.
No, but it was wow. That's a whole sub story of how we pulled that off. But anyway, we took the profits of that and went to the deserts of Southern California to prove you could go to a desert and grow spirulina and feed people. Pulled it off. We did it. Way ahead of it was in many ways way ahead of its time. And it actually went nowhere in terms of feeding people. It wasn't because of the technology, And so meanwhile, I've got a degree in consciousness research, right? And I know it's about consciousness. Well, that in hindsight is kind of when I look back on it, and during that period, this is early 80s, that certain idealism bubble got popped, and realized that no, it really is about consciousness, not just as a concept, because it was blocked at political levels and the bureaucracy and all of that is the reason it didn't move forward.
Jeez.
So I basically said, oh, the heck with this humanitarian stuff. I'm going to go make money again for myself. So I started a company, which became very successful pretty quickly. And don't get me wrong, that was a lot of fun. But there was a deeper sense of what I know now in my own heart, inner guidance, my own intuition, saying it doesn't really matter if you save the life of another microprocessor or not. That's not what your mission is and your purpose. So I would say, following my own inner guidance, ended up meeting Doc Childry, the founder of HeartMath.
Yeah.
And so we connected, and he was on the East Coast at that time, and I had to be back there for business anyways. I'll go meet this character I'm hearing about through some mutual friends. And it's been an hour or two, and go catch my flight. And anyway, 3 days later, I finally left. And
wow.
So that was really getting, meanwhile, I think read about the heart, studied the heart and all this consciousness stuff, right? But no, I didn't know blank about the heart.
You didn't?
Not really, because it was through that process and what unfolded from that I really know the heart is something. It's not a metaphor. It's not the brain like we think. I'll give the heart, talk about it, but not really take it seriously. That must be a metaphor that these ancient people, they didn't know what they were talking about. Anyway, through that process, discovered, no, it really is the doorway to, larger fields of consciousness, one way to say it, or to your higher self. So it was that personal experience that led me to sell that company pretty quickly, and join with Doc and some others to help him found HeartMath.
And go all in, yeah.
And then,
tell us more about that. Like, I'd love to hear that from your words. Like you said, the doorway to the heart is the doorway to higher conscious, and that we throw this around all the come from your heart, talk with your heart, but it really is so pat. And you've devoted yourself to the science of trying to explain this is the real deal.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was that. It's impossible to describe a personal experience of something where you really do connect with your deeper self and get elevated into higher levels of consciousness. You have to experience it. You can't ever explain it to someone, in any kind of meaningful way. But it was pretty profound for me to more or less walk away from my multi-million-dollar business. And I sold it for far less than it was actually worth, but I knew it was a time to go, right?
Yeah.
So the research isn't for me to prove that to myself.
Right.
It's to help guide others and show that there's real science here. I don't know.
Can you share some of that science? Can you share?
Sure, we can talk about science. Sure.
Means what?
Yeah. Well, in the context of intuition, our research has covered so many different areas now. But in that particular few years of research that we really focused on. Can we measure this from an electrophysiological perspective? One of the things that we still hear to this day, and I'm sure you do too, because I know you teach HeartMath, and after people take it a little more seriously and practice the skills and learning what heart coherence is and how to shift into that state, after a few weeks, usually, that people start coming back and saying, God, my intuition's on steroids. This is really different. This is not subtle. And then usually they talk about synchronicities have also noticeably jumped and become a way of life. I hear that a lot and can say that for myself. That's true for myself as well. So we ended up figuring out a protocol to measure. Before I go there, as you know from being a trainer, there were 3 types of intuitions that in my writings and the way I think about it, 3 different buckets.
Yeah, sure.
Which helps I find it really helps clarify it for people. Otherwise, it's this big mush of stuff, But in the third category, which we call non-local intuition, was where the experiments were at that time were focused. And we actually did a couple different protocols over a few years there. But the first one was that you're sitting at a computer, kind of like we are right now, having a Zoom call, I guess, but or not Zoom, but Riverside.
Yep.
And meanwhile, we got people wired up. We're measuring their brain waves. So we got electrode caps on, measuring the heartbeats, electrocardiogram, and skin conductance, and these types of things. And the protocol was that you push a button. We measure all this data is being recorded. And then some point later, depending upon what the protocol was, the computer, after the data has been collected, randomly selects an image that it showed to the person. The groups of people went through this protocol. And it was either going to be an image that was a really yucky one, like a snake striking the screen, or a bad guy with a knife at a woman's throat, or, pretty edgy stuff. Yeah. Or it was going to be nature scenes and bunny rabbits and flowers and things like that. The key point here is that it was impossible for anyone, even the computer didn't know what the future image was going to be till after the data was collected, right? So all that data prior to seeing the image is what we call pre-stimulus. The image being the stimulus that we found. And I'll tell you the real story, that way it really went down. So this was a protocol that kind of borrowed or got part of the idea from, not the whole idea, from a friend of mine, Dean Radin, who had done some similar kind of experiments. And he had found that there was a difference in skin conductance prior to seeing the image. So we were measuring that as well. We didn't see that.
Okay.
In our experiments. And this is a big deal. I mean, there's 30 people gone through this protocol twice in a heart coherent state before going through it, and not in another context. So hundreds of hours have gone into setting this experiment up and collecting the data. So we looked at the skin conductance first, didn't see it. So we actually called up Dean and hey, Dean, we didn't see this. We failed to replicate your findings. And he goes, oh, by the way, when I did that experiment, we made sure we selected for people who did not have experience in meditation and self-regulation practices.
Huh.
Because they don't have this response if they do.
I didn't hear this part. I've never heard this part before.
I know. I thought you might have. We selected for that because we wanted people to be able to be in a coherent state.
Get into it, right? Yeah, because you taught people how to get into it.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So anyway, I was kind of like, Dean. Kind of a minor thing, right? We have to mention, but it ended up being perfect as it unfolded. Because we'd only looked at the skin conductance state at that point.
Oh, okay.
So then we went forward and did the analysis of the heart data, the ECG heart rate variability data. And what we found there was a huge, significant pre-stimulus response.
Mm.
Huge.
So they're having a response. They're having a response to what is going to come on the screen before it has come onto the screen.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
So the way this ended up, so I'll jump to the bottom line. What this research showed was that the heart got the information first, sent a measurably different neural signal to the brain. That's a whole other process called heartbeat evoked potential analysis. Then you had a brain response, then body, skin conductance.
Then skin conductance. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the gut gets the credit, right? Because that's where you feel it in the body or the hair on the back of the neck, these different physiological body responses. But the real flow of information is heart, brain, then body if you're paying attention, you get the feeling, right? Where it becomes a felt experience. And what was really interesting, we could actually see this in all the EEG data, that those that had, especially if you were in the coherent state first, that the brain actually, the brain-body system knew that this wasn't real. So it inhibited the stress response. So you didn't have the skin conductance response.
If you'd done the meditation beforehand.
Yeah. Yeah. Which all of our subjects did. Okay. So it was pretty cool the way that all mapped out. So the way I got that published at that time, right, in peer-reviewed scientific journals, right, was to say that the heart appears to have access to a field of information outside the boundaries of time and space. Okay. So at that, again, this is late 90s, I guess, when we published that work. And I'm a little more out of the closet now. I'm old enough and well published enough. You kind of can't do anything with me, but
right. Was it a big deal? Was it like, did it get tons of criticism and tons of?
No. It was actually, it led to a lot of cool things, actually. But the point, so now what I would say is that if you ask me that, well, what is a field of information outside the boundaries of time and space? Right? Yeah. I used to ask people that question, but it was all over the map. So I basically cut through it. I would suggest there's a lot of different words for it, depending upon your culture. Here at HeartMath, you just call it your larger self, right? But your higher self, your soul, your spirit, or if you're in a religious background, the God within, right, whatever. So the pretty cool research suggesting that the heart really is kind of where we started, the access point to your larger self.
Yeah. And so just to
the flow of where does intuition come from? The real inner guidance intuition.
Well, and because I ask people that, where do you think it comes from? Do you think it comes, are you streaming it? Is it coming from inside?
Well, so I would say, yes, you're streaming it, but you're streaming it from yourself.
From
my perspective, we're any living system actually, but certainly human beings are multidimensional energy units. You could say it that way, but we're all multidimensional beings. So the energetic part, right, that you can't put under a microscope, not yet anyway,
right,
and measure directly. So that's really what I'm talking about. That's a higher dimensional part of our wholeness. It's what glues us together, right? In a certain way. What I would suggest here, Abby, is we have two hearts. You have the physical heart, and yes, we can talk about the intrinsic cardiac nervous system, the heart, brain, and the physiology of just getting coherent and the myriad benefits of that. But the really big game benefit I'm suggesting of getting in that more coherent state is that it's opening that channel between the energetic heart and your larger self. So we're starting to stream information from the higher dimensional part of ourself. So it's part of our, to steal a term from David Bohm, our undivided wholeness, right? It's that. So in a way, we're channeling, but we're channeling ourselves, right?
We're channeling our own energy.
I usually would never say that word, but that really is what we're doing. I mean, who are you talking to when you go in deeper? The way I sometimes will in trainings, you probably know this. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Darn, sorry about that. We'll have to edit that out. I'll be another one coming. Usually they come in pairs.
Okay.
Yeah, we go.
Bless you.
Sorry about that. So is one of the things I'll often ask an audience is just think back over the past few days, week, or recent time. And has there been a situation that's come up that maybe you were asked to do something, or you're kind of had a mind thought or directed thing of something that you wanted to do, not do, whatever, but you just had a deeper inner sense that wasn't the right choice?
Yeah.
How about you? You had one like that?
Oh yeah, but my history is normally that I go ahead and did it anyway.
Well, then that's the next thing, right? And then we follow what the mind wanted.
Right.
And then let that play out for days, weeks, whatever the period is.
Marriage, maybe. Just saying, it's fine.
Yeah, right. Well, exactly. Then you look back and say, God, I wish I'd followed that deeper inner sense, right?
Exactly.
Well, that's you could say, to put it in kind of simple terms, head, heart.
Yeah.
Right. And the mind's used to having its way.
Yes.
Right. So we ignore those deeper intuitions that are on that higher dimensional part of ourself that is in a dimension outside of time and space. It really is our best friend once the mind finally realizes that and kind of surrenders to the intuitive guidance of we just call it your heart, but it's really your larger self.
It's really your larger self. Yeah. It's your inner.
But the heart is the access point. See?
Yeah. That's how you get
energetic. To be more specific, the energetic heart, just call it the heart.
Yeah. It's so funny because, you really, you really look like a scientist and you really sound like a scientist.
Well, I kind of am one,
You are
so
a scientist, right?
yeah.
You are a scientist, but you're talking about these things that I think, at least in my experience and in my interviews and all that kind of stuff, it's just not that widely known and accepted. I mean, like we run in circles, right? Where everybody's
Mhm.
talking about this, so I always feel like, oh, everybody knows this. And then I step outside in the world and it's like, no, nobody knows this. And some people will actively argue any
Well,
idea of higher consciousness or anything like
yeah,
that.
well, sure, and I know what I just said. Not everybody's going to agree with,
Right.
and that's okay.
Yeah.
I would also challenge them to prove me wrong
Yeah.
because they won't be able to. I'll make that prediction.
Right.
I mean, because what I just said, it assumes. Well, for me, it's not an assumption. I've had my own experience here, but that we do have a higher self to begin with, if whatever you want to call it, or larger self, that we're, or spirit or soul, whatever you want to call it, and that's first of all real, and then that I mean, and what I'm saying, Abby, is not new.
Right.
This is the central teaching of every single great religion on the planet and philosophy. I mean, whether you're Christian, what Christ say, right? The heart. It's all about the heart. Islam, 190 references to the spiritual heart, as they call it there, same thing as the energetic heart in the Quran. Buddhism, right? Chinese medicine, the heart houses the mind. I mean, it's central to
Everywhere. Right.
everywhere. So it's not new. It's just that the mind, like I said, wants its way. So just to unpack that a little more, what HeartMath is really about, in a way, if I can say it this way, is coherently aligning the heart, mind, and emotions. Right. So as we just talked about, the heart being the bridge to our larger self, and the emotional system, which is a very complex energetic system.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not just hormones and nervous system activity. Yes, it is that, but it's much more. I mean, and it's the emotional system and this is so easy to prove here in the lab. The emotions run the show. When it comes to our physiology, it's what drives the activity in our nervous system, our hormonal system, etc., and our choices and behaviors in the world. It's all emotionally driven.
Yes.
People don't like hearing that because it's the mind, and no, it's
Mm-mm.
not. But the emotional system, it is the mind, though, in the context that the emotional system is kind of neutral. I mean, it's in service of the mind or the heart.
Meaning the thought is tipping off the emotion.
Yeah, the mental thought,
Yeah.
belief systems, all that goes, I would put in the mind dimension,
Yeah.
right? Which
Right.
has got its thing. And then I'm not saying I don't want a very well-functioning brain and mind. I do. It's an important role to be here on Earth in this dimension of density. But the problem is that humanity as a whole is living from the mind. Also, the emotional system is really mind-driven, and most people don't even know they have a heart. I mean, no, in this context. I
Yeah.
mean, don't believe me? Watch the news, right? This is the play out of a mind-driven baseline consciousness of humanity, right? The
Yeah. Say a
chaos, the
little bit more about
separation.
that. Say a little bit more about that.
Well, the separation,
Yeah.
disconnection, just being disconnected from our own higher self and disconnected from others,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we're seeing the play out of all the chaos and the separation, extreme separation and discord going on. So that's and it's been going forever. I mean, many, thousands of years this has been going on. It's just getting more extreme now. And so it's part of the shift. I mean, a lot of people talk about the shift. It's a shift in consciousness. The next jump in humanity is what HeartMath is really about facilitating, is that next evolutionary step in human consciousness at a global scale. But for that to happen, the mind finally surrendering to the emotional system, then the mind and emotions becoming in service of our own larger self, right?
Instead of the other way
And
around.
brought into, that's what we mean by aligning the heart, mind, and emotions.
Right.
And
And what I find is like such the difficulty is that the mind is so complex that
well,
you see
yeah,
the division and people will the thoughts log on
yeah.
to, and this is the mind's right and wrong, so
Mhm.
people are logging on to what's right or what's wrong, and it just creates more and more and more of the divide.
Yeah, well, it's like, again, that's mind level consciousness at the mind level. So, I mean, we can talk about brain mind, but it's basically what happens when we start really aligning with our larger self through the energetic heart. The mind gets an upgrade in terms of its operating system. And
Yeah.
we really do have a mind operating system, and it's used to having its way, right? And,
Yeah.
but the crazy thing is, once the mind finally does learn to surrender and get an upgrade, that it's the big winner.
The mind is.
The mind comes out way better off when it finally surrenders to a much more intelligent dimension.
Right. Yeah.
And it's way past the intelligence of the higher dimension of the heart. When I'm talking about at the larger self level, is way past mind level, the dimension it operates in.
Right. What we think we know now. There's so much more.
Yeah. And so this is really the essence of where intuition comes from. It's the flow of information from our larger self through the heart, the energetic heart, down into the mind-brain system. And well, actually, the energetic heart's in communication with the DNA. DNA is really an antenna. So yes, it's got information like your eye color and boy, girl, blah 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 blah, for the physical system. But it's connected to the energetic heart, which is where our individual blueprint exists at, who we really are. That was one of the big surprises. If you remember, we're going to map the human genome and then realize there's nowhere near enough, way not enough coding information to create a human, or a living system. Where's all the missing information?
Right. Where is all the missing information?
So that's what I'm saying. It's at the you talk about the mind being complex. Well, yes, but not really compared to
what is really going on, what we can't see.
Yeah.
Yeah. The beautiful thing about HeartMath, or at least to me, because I am such a fan of intuition, I think because it's been such a struggle to follow it. And I think men and women have different angles of that. Women have working with women and being a woman. I feel that we really have been trained in a lot of ways to not listen to our intuition and to defer. And so it's kind of a really big thing to take that journey of, recognizing all the times that I haven't followed it. And what's so fascinating about HeartMath, it's just this one simple tool that you do it and you automatically know what it is. You said we function sort of like we don't have a heart, right? And earlier before that, you said, if you're paying attention, you get to feel the sensation, because we're living from the neck up so much that we don't either feel the sensation at all, and we don't even bother to think about the heart. And here HeartMath has created these incredibly easy tools that literally ground you in that higher self. And suddenly you have this intuitive knowing if you have the courage to follow it.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And it takes practice. And, because just like we talk about, neuroplasticity and changing neural circuits within the brain and physiological baselines, all very real and which we talk a lot about as well. But it's the same thing that goes on in our energetic systems. You have to build new connections and pathways, if you will. So that's part of what goes on. Because those original experiments I remember Abby, I mentioned we had the first experiment we did was 30 people went through that protocol, that one I told you about. They got heart coherent for a few minutes before they went through the experiment. And the other time we did it in what's called a counterbalanced way. Then the other time they all went through it, we were nice to them. We come in, we wire them up, but we don't get coherent first. We just do the experiment. So I'll let you guess, when they got into a coherent state prior to the experiment, what do you think the difference was?
I think they were be able to maintain. They didn't have as much of a reaction when they saw those scary pictures.
Well, they still had the reaction that you all, but remember, you did inhibit.
They knew what was going to happen.
Yeah, but that channel we mentioned that we can. It's called heartbeat evoked potentials. It's way too complex to go into, but it's a way you can literally measure the flow of neural information going from the heart to the brain, when, where, and how it processes through all the different, both in time and physically through the brain. And when you were in that coherent state, prior to that channel from heart to brain was opened up, right to the frontal cortex. And which is the self-regulation circuits that it facilitated as well. So basically you're connecting, you're opening that channel, but the mind's still tricky, and it doesn't like to lose customers. Right? so it takes some time, and some experience because once you give the mind one little thread to step in with the intuitive insight,
they're all over it.
So intuition, a lot of times the last step in the freeze frame technique, which is about accessing intuition, is then follow through on it.
Yeah, that is my favorite of all the tools that the freeze frame where you're accessing that higher knowing. I mean, it works like magic.
Yeah, but it takes some practice
Yeah.
and having really the courage. I mean, for me, when I go back, God, however many 30s, probably getting close to 40 years ago, when I made that choice to sell my company basically to the employees and make a quick exit. That was following that intuition.
Yeah.
Looking back, it was absolutely the right decision to make, but it was. There was a period of chaos after that, because you might imagine what went on with my partners and friends in that business, because it was kind of the main engineering force there. Anyway, you have to have the courage and kind of also be patient enough to let the dust settle.
Now, the other thing that it made me think of just now is, the other thing that you always say in HeartMath is taking this, because you keep saying it takes practice, which it absolutely does. Taking this, I mean, business attitude. I think one of the things that happens when people learn this, and so, I mean, I experience this as well, that you think you're doing it, you're doing the breathing or you're doing the exercise, but the mind is like, okay, we're good. We tried that.
Well, exactly. That's why I say the mind's used to having its way, right?
Yeah. And I think, actually a great example of what you were talking about earlier is like, even you, just for listeners to know, I got the time wrong of this podcast. And so I came on late. And of course, the time that I had squared away was the time that I'd squared away to prepare for this. I mean, obviously I've met Rollin before, I've trained with you, we had a meeting before this, but so then before we got on, you were like, hey, do you want to take a minute? Yes, thank you very much. I would like to take a minute to get into coherence. But as we're going through it, right, the mind is saying, this is a big interview. Like, how did you screw this up? Why did you, da-da-da? And you have to pull back, right, to say, no, I'm going to be here now. I'm going to be coherent now and not let the mind do all of those things. And I guess I shared that example because I just feel like I was running a group earlier today, and I just have so many people contact me about the podcast and stuff too. And I think that just because you do this work, the mind doesn't still pull you in all these directions, and you still don't have all those same old personality parts that you always had. Like you becomes Buddha all of a sudden. And I really feel like that's such a harmful thing for people to believe, because as you and I talked about, and this leads into one of the things that I really wanted to talk to you about, was shame and, guilt and shame and judgment and self-judgment.
Yeah.
And what that does, which it just feels like it's just an absolute epidemic.
Yeah.
And so that's why I kind of like to share those examples. And I have this beautiful real life example of like, no, I'm working right now. Like right now I'm working to stay regulated and, be in the present moment and, not fall into what the mind wants me to do, around judging myself that I was late, So let's talk about some of that self-judgment and blame and all of that.
Yeah, I would say the three primary tools the mind has to keep us in the mind dimension, in kind of a lower dimensional vibration, really, from what I'm really talking about, are judgments, comparisons, and blame.
Yeah.
It's so automatic. That is the primary kind of frequencies of the dimension of the mind. You talk about judgment, and it's, well, of course, if you really tune in, we judge all the time. And probably about everybody listening to this, or most people, think they're smarter than everybody else. Really.
Their mind does anyway, right?
And so we're justified in blaming and comparing and, separating. And
what's the impact of all of that?
I'd have to go a little bit wider here than what I can prove scientifically, but this doesn't mean it's not true. That I kind of mentioned earlier, we need a new operating system, right? In terms of so we're on, from my perspective, an evolutionary journey for the evolution of consciousness, right? So that journey really is about learning to connect with and follow the direction of our own larger self. And there's a certain eye of the needle that you kind of have to go through. It's a literal frequency shift in consciousness into a higher vibrational state. And what can't go through that eye of the needle into that next octave of, there's more than one, but those next octave up of consciousness, the vibrational consciousness, what can't make it through there are judgments, comparisons, and blame. So those keep us locked in 3D, as a lot of people would call it, as sort of we around HeartMath, 3D consciousness. That's kind of the current baseline of humanity, of the mind. And so the mind, as I said, it's really tricky.
Yeah.
I mean, if we could have a computer readout at the end of the day, right? I mean, there's different, I've seen different estimates on how many thoughts a person has a day,
Right.
and it's kind of all over the map, but it's a lot, right?
Yeah.
And then I just saw one a couple of weeks ago that somebody had done some research. I need to track that down now and pay more attention to it. That it was something like close to 90% of those thoughts are the same ones we had yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So we're kind of stuck in a certain.
And like 80% of them are negative, right?
Well, probably, but
Crazy.
a lot.
Yeah.
That depends, I think. But yeah, so the self-blame, self-judging, those are all in that dimension that just keep us stuck in a lower vibration.
Yeah. So, and I think that there's kind of the mind tells us, or there's sort of this, I don't know if it's from the industrial age or what, but this, this idea that if we beat ourselves into submission, if we blame ourselves enough or say, oh, you really screwed that up, that's somehow going to motivate us.
Yeah, but it does just the opposite. It keeps people locked in, like I said, in that lower consciousness vibration.
Yeah. And then they're not able to see possibility.
Yeah. So it's way better to oops and move on, right? If you make a mistake or whatever.
Yeah. What do you think it would be like if, what do you think the news would be like if we all were high? What would the news actually be if we were in a higher vibrational state?
Yeah. I mean, as a collective, well, we are headed there, I think, collectively.
Yeah. Which is hard for a lot of people to imagine right now.
Well, let me give you a perspective on that. And it might sound kind of wild, but it's actually true from my perspective. Imagine if you could time travel back a couple thousand years even and take a Bic lighter with you.
Okay.
And, people around the campfire or whatever, and you flick your Bic.
Yeah.
What would with those people at that era, I mean, you'd probably be a god.
Yeah. They'd be like, what's going on? Yeah.
Well, I mean, but if you ask them to imagine what's possible, right? They couldn't do it. They could not even conceive, let alone an iPhone.
Right.
Or anything else we take for granted. It's casual, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're sitting there with a Bic lighter. We know it's just technology. It's no big deal.
Right.
But to them, you couldn't imagine it. So I'm actually saying that we're like that now.
Yeah.
That the shift in consciousness, because that when you do make it through that eye of the needle into that next octave of consciousness, then we actually become co-creators, true co-creators with the collective of our own reality. And that's right now, that's sort of a safety valve. Yes, we're all, truly co-creating our reality, but it's within the dimension of the mind.
Right.
But if it had the power of real creation, the world's a mess now. Think of what it would be like if you had the power of where, our consciousness could create our own reality with those judgments and comparisons and blames.
Wait, say that part again.
Well, imagine how we probably wouldn't still exist if we had the power of real creation, if we were able to take the separations, the judgments, blames, comparisons with us into that next level of
into the next. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I mean, we're already, a mess.
A mess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
We would already wiped ourselves out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to me, like when I think about this, I know that everybody's really upset and there's all these things going on. To me, I kind of look at it and I don't say it very often because it's not really received very well, but I feel like everything that is happening is in the service of higher consciousness. Like I kind of feel
I would agree with that so from my perspective, the shift that humanity is going through as a whole is real. And that shift really is an upgrade in consciousness. It requires aligning with the heart, where the mind finally has to surrender to the heart. Mind and emotions become in service of our higher self or larger self. That is the shift in consciousness to a higher vibration. For the shift energies that are really going on right now, things have to get bad enough for people to finally say enough is enough. We've tried everything else. Why don't we give the heart a chance? Let's give love a chance. Kind of way like right now, when our thing is help love go viral. As love is the a lot of confusion around love, but I mean, yes, it's a human emotion. We fall in love, and have all these more energy, and all the stuff that goes along with that. But it would suggest that love is actually an intelligence. It's the intelligence that informs the universe in a way. That is really the big love that we're talking about. Aligning, so as we connect more with, it really gets really simple. The older I get and the more practices I've done, the simpler it gets, and that is, radiate love. Because as we're radiating that vibration, that is what it's increasing our consciousness vibration. So we're connecting with who we really are at our larger self, our purpose, our blueprint, our inner security all becomes, way different at a different vibrational level.
Yeah.
So we start to know that we can handle whatever comes our way. That may sound kind of crude because I know people are in a lot of tough situations, but no, that it's still so that a lot of the chaos that we're going through now, and it's suggested it ain't over yet. It really is pushing humanity towards there's got to be another way. So let's give love a chance, right? And the first step towards that is learning to get along with each other.
Right.
Because right now the biggest, I would say, issue for facing us individually and humanity as a whole is separation. It is the separation from our larger self and separation from others. Because as we're more living just from the mind, not really connected to our own larger self or higher self, whatever you want to call it, then that easily lets us separate from others. I'm smarter than you. I'm better than you. I'm different than you. My way's better.
How about this? I'm more loving than you. The sneakiness of the mind, right? I mean, because we have a whole population of people who are very much in the higher conscious community and speaking love and love and promoting love, but we get blinded even in that.
That's true. And there's steps in this evolution of consciousness, but that's still better than, right? At least not thinking that way, trying to be that way,
Yeah.
It was, she's kind of interesting. I don't know why the intuition here. I won't mention names, but talking with a researcher, actually in India, I was invited to a big conference there that brought all the spiritual leaders from around the world together. It was a very big deal. So I got to be invited as a speaker at it. And one of the researchers there developed a survey. And she was saying one of the scales was anxiety, stress, anxiety.
Yeah.
And she was telling me she had to rename the scale because all the meditators wouldn't admit. I mean, she was clearly measuring that they had a lot of anxiety in this stuff we're talking about, but they wouldn't accept. I meditate. I'm not anxious. It was really, it was a classic example of that self-foolery.
Oh my God. Yeah. It's funny because I say on this a lot, I study, I don't know if you're familiar with Gurdjieff. So I study with a teacher. I've been studying that work for a number of years, and he calls it the terror of the situation. Just the mind. There's no way to know ourselves.
Right. Well, there's so many examples of that. And I don't want to make it sound like that I'm saying the mind is a bad thing. Right? Because that's important, because one of its tricks is to go to bad. I did bad. And that's another thing that keeps us in that lower dimension, right? But, so we're in kind of, a lot of people would say, including me, that we're in 3D consciousness right now, if we want to give it numbers.
Yeah.
Well, it used to be 2D. So 3D is a whole lot better than 2D, right?
All right. True.
So now we need to make the shift into higher fourth is the next consciousness shift. It's not fifth like New Age thinks, but that's another story. So, if you're walking upstairs, you don't turn around and judge the stair behind you. It got you to the step you're on. Does that make sense? So it's kind of like, the mind's not bad. It just needs an upgrade for its next level of evolution.
Yeah.
An upgrade in its operating system. And there's techniques that help us do that. It's really that.
Well, and I think that the beautiful thing about HeartMath and the technique is that it quiets the mind so much. So when you said, go take up the next step, you don't judge the step behind you. But of course, then the mind also has the game that it plays. It says, well, then you're not taking responsibility. Mm-hmm. So but all these things can happen in a state of love. You can take responsibility. You can acknowledge who you're being and who you've been.
Sure. You said something earlier that's right. The research I was talking about, actually women were way better in general than men. Not that men can't have really wild intuitions. Right? They can, but.
Women were better at detecting their intuition?
Yeah, better. Well, yes, even at following it, I think, than men in general.
Interesting.
it's interesting. But I'm not saying that they don't have a big jump to make there too. But so we're really good about men in general of really denial. What these emotions and all that stuff, and
I don't
living
feel
in your
that.
mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. So women in general are a little more in touch with their emotional world and therefore their intuition than men. But for a lot of times, half the battle is that self-awareness and I would say heart vulnerability to really admit where we're really at and what we're really feeling.
Right.
Right. And women in general have an easier time with that than men.
But when you're in heart coherence, I guess is what I'm saying, is that you're sort of automatically in that place, or at least a lot closer.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. That's opening that channel, right?
You're
Yeah.
opening the
So,
channel and you're
yeah,
just.
and when we talk about heart coherence, so one of the tools that really helps a lot of people, not necessarily everybody along this journey, is the biofeedback, the heart HRV coherence biofeedback that lets you see, at least at a physiological level, as my nervous system in that incoherent or coherent state.
Yeah.
Now we can use different terms. I mean, I talk about you have an incoherent rhythm or a coherent rhythm, but we could also say it's a dysregulated nervous system to a regulated nervous system, right? Or it's an energy deficient state to an energy efficient state. I mean, a lot of different things we can say. It's all the same, means the same thing. So having the feedback keeps you really help. Well, I still use it. Keeps me honest. Right?
Yeah.
And
Do you use it on
especially
your phone or on your computer?
usually my phone.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of really neat research that's come out around the benefits of just in the last few years. That's really awesome to me. I mean, showing that just being in a heart coherent state, that physiological state of coherence, that it's literally rewiring the circuits in our brain between the frontal cortex and the amygdala and adding neural growth in the frontal cortex. I mean, the part for us to be able to be in charge of ourselves, to self-regulate those higher states. But here's the point I wanted to make, Abby, is that you can simply breathe yourself into coherence. And that's great. There's a lot of benefits from that, but it's not the deeper coherence that we're talking about and I'm talking about.
Okay.
That takes that connection with the higher self, the larger self. And that's where, as you know, as a trainer, it's like attitude breathing, like, so you're doing the breathing, heart focused breathing, putting your attention in the center of the heart energetically. Then where you're, like you mentioned meditation earlier, I was before I met Doc and got into HeartMath, I was I had a degree in consciousness, right? I was a long-term meditator. And part of why I made that shift, go back to that, is I made more personal gain and progress in my own growth in 3 months than I had in years of meditation practices in mind. Not that I'm down on any of that. It was one of those steps on my journey, right? So anyway, it's that deep, when we actually breathe love, right? So if the mind, who doesn't have looping minds? I mean, the idea of being able to meditate and stop thoughts, I don't know anyone that can really do that. But what I found one of the most effective things for me is two things. One is to, as you do the heart focused breathing, just breathe in a feeling of inner stillness. Just breathe inner stillness. So now you're starting to take kind of another level of charge, and that does really help still the mind. But it's not like you don't have thoughts. So the mind wants to be active. Okay, great. Not about just shutting the mind off. Give it something to do, right? Think about all the people I love that I want to radiate love to. Kind of go through a list, or see it if you're into visualization. Great. HeartMath's not about the visualization technique, but visualize rings of energy coming out from the heart, radiating out into the planetary field. So it's little tricks like that can really help keep that heart focus, and which again is that doorway to upping our frequency.
Yeah.
You've got to know what I'm talking about here.
Yeah. No, and I think it's really helpful, because I think a lot of people, we think about the breath, and not like one of the ways that I have heard it explained and that works for me is to think about, like, let the breath breathe me, because I think what happens a lot is when people are learning these techniques is they're like, okay, I'm going to breathing in and out of my heart now. Breathing into my heart, the monitor nothing's changing on the coherence spectrum or whatever, because they're still in their mind. They haven't dropped in. And so what you're saying is all these different things that you can do just to bring yourself to embody that state. That can be so helpful. And say something about because I just think that this can't be conveyed enough, the energetic field around the heart and how it impacts, because I know that one of the big initiatives is world coherence, right? Speak about that for a moment.
Okay. So great question, Abby. when we put electrodes on the body, let's say across the chest to measure the electrocardiogram, or we stick them on your head to measure the electroencephalograph brainwaves, what are we measuring? Why do you think it's called the electrocardiogram? Measuring electricity, literally. So that's what the electrodes see. They are measuring current flow, the flow of electrical current. Okay, and of course, the heart's 100 times more than brainwaves. You measure the heart in millivolts, brainwaves in microvolts, so it's a whole different octave of voltage difference. But whenever you have a flow of electrical current, this is science 101, right? You generate a magnetic field. The electrodes don't see that. They're just measuring current flow. So to measure the magnetic field, you have to have a different instrument. That's called a magnetometer. And most larger hospitals have, by the way, what are called MCGs, magnetocardiograms, which are sensors, magnetic sensors that you put around the body that never touch you. They're just measuring the magnetic field. Now, one of the qualities of the magnetic field, this is where my past communication engineering days came in really handy for what I do now, is magnetic fields go through things, right? So this is why your cell phone works indoors, right? So we're using the electromagnetic field to carry information, right, from your phone to the cell tower or to satellites or whatever.
Yeah.
The voice, your text message, whatever, it's the field is the carrier of that information.
Yeah.
Right. So you can even be in an elevator and your cell phone works. Right. So it's a magnetic component going through the walls and the windows and all that. So same thing with the magnetic field that's generated by the body. When the heart beats, the current flow, you create a magnetic field. It easily radiates right out through the skin into the space around us. So how do I know this? Well, you can measure it, right, with devices called magnetometers.
Yeah.
Now, in medical situations, you get the sensors close because you want to have a good signal to noise ratio, but you can back that sensor up, and you can get around 3 or 4 feet, around 3 feet from the heart, the body, before you lose the ability to detect the heartbeat. About an inch away from the head before you lose the capacity to measure a brainwave. So it's pretty easy to understand when we're talking energetically, magnetically speaking, that the heart's the big player here. Right. So the energetic system I'm talking about. Now, what we did, this is going way back a bunch of years, right, is using almost exactly the same techniques I used back in my days at Motorola to decode the information being carried by the field, right, and this is what all radios, just TVs, radio broadcast, all work the same way. Okay. And we were able to see that the heart's field is carrying information about our emotional state. Probably a lot more, but we know that for sure. And this is all published in journals and things. So what this first thing that I'm saying here is what this means is what we feel doesn't stop at the skin. Mm-hmm. We are always 24/7 radiating. As long as we're alive and the heart's beating, we're radiating these fields into the environment. We call that you can think of it as your personal field environment. And so the next step in that line of research is, well, that's pretty cool, but is there a big so what to this? Like it is the nervous systems of others detecting and in a measurable way responding to the information being carried by our heart's field.
Yeah.
And as you know, if you're a trainer, the answer was yes.
Yeah.
And this shouldn't be a surprise to anybody listening to a podcast like yours, right? And this is actually one of the types, this ties in, I said there are 3 types of intuition. One of the second type I call energetic sensitivity.
Right.
Right. Which is our nervous system's ability to detect real signals from the environment and decode and respond to them in a meaningful way. So this is really the basis of true empathy that I'm talking about now, as we know that the heart's radiating these fields and our nervous systems are not only broadcasting, but our nervous systems are receiving the fields in measurable ways. Again, not a surprise for your audience, I'm sure.
But you can never hear it enough, really.
What's cool is we can measure it and explain it.
Yeah.
But I'm saying most of the audience, I bet, listening to your podcast has had the experience.
Yes. Of knowing. Right. Yeah.
Of walking into a room and before anybody says anything, boy, something's off here.
Yeah. Yes, right? You can feel it.
The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife, right? These are kind of sayings we have in our language. Or, we're in resonance with somebody is another term. It just means that we have it's actually a little resonance. People may not know that, but it actually really is.
It really is.
A resonant connection. At the field level. Hopefully just that knowledge I've learned helps some people take more responsibility for what they're feeding the field.
Yes. And not only that, but I think it's so helpful when we're trying to get out of like a heightened emotional response to something that's happening in our field to take a step back and be able to be like, well, wait a minute, what was I putting out?
Well, right. That's what I'm saying. What am I feeding? One of the things I often recommend especially new audiences that know the deeper aspects of our research and work, is, pause throughout the day as often as you can remember to, and just simply ask yourself, what am I feeding the field? Am I feeding the field vibrations of, because it really is. Now, in this case, when I talk about vibrations, it can sound like some new agey thing. No, I mean literally, because we can measure, these are actual real frequencies being carried by the field, right? So, we can actually see what the frequency of anger or anxiety look like in this case. So I can actually use scientific language and talk in a vibrational way here. I've been doing that all along, but just to help ground that for people who might be listening. So pause, ask yourself, what am I feeding the field? Is it maybe I'm feeding the field vibrations of impatience?
Yeah.
Frustration, anxiety, fear, huge on the planet
Not
right
enoughness.
now. Yeah. Those frequencies. Or am I feeding the field love, compassion, kindness?
Yeah.
Right. Impatience. These are all real frequencies that other people, our nervous systems, are detecting. So this is huge in very practical ways, in interactions with your salesman or a customer service or a doctor or a nurse or really anything, family members. This communication is going on. And it's one of the biggest issues in miscommunication, because the field, you might be saying one thing and what you're feeling might not even have anything to do with the person you're talking to or the communication you're making, but you might have some anxiety going on, or
right.
But that's the frequency of the field that they're unconscious. For most people, it's unconscious, but it's still biasing their perception.
So I'm smiling because, the other day my older son was home and we were talking about something about when he was a kid or something, and he goes, "Whoa!" He said, "Wait a minute, that's not my thought. That's your thought." And I was like, "What was it?" And it was some like deep guilt about something that happened, when he was a kid, and he felt it. And like, I didn't say anything. We were just talking. He was like, "Whoa, I just think I had one of your thoughts." And it's exactly that.
Well, good for him. That shows a deeper level of sensitivity. That's awesome.
Well, that's the problem with, raising kids in this, right? They'll be like, "Mom, what are you feeding the field?"
Yeah, I know. I had the same issue. My son's 39 now, but when raising him in this kind of a system, he'd be, my wife and I might be, a little disagreement or something. He would be, "Hey guys,
right, practice what you preach."
Yeah.
Well, he was in one of your studies. I know it's in the training that I took. Actually, not the last one, but one before, with the dog, Josh, and the dog, and he was brought in and literally taught to get in heart coherence, and the dog was responding.
Yeah, just for people who might be listening, he was 12, I think, when we did that. How long we've been doing this. It's still in the trainings because it's such a potent example, and people resonate with animals.
Yeah.
Basically, when Josh sent love to Mabel, the dog, her heart rhythm shifted into coherence without him touching her, or touching her, petting her, talking to her. Just that energetic communication. That's been replicated many times over now, by the way.
Ah, yeah. And with horses, I was just doing some work with horses like a couple of weeks ago, and it's just astounding. Like I was sort of dysregulated or worried about time or whatever. And the horse had his head over the fence, like doing this weird thing. Mm-hmm. And then, the person told me, like, just get into coherence, get it. And I did. And I swear to God, this horse just turned around and walked. I mean, he had his head like this close to me. I could feel his breath, And in
fact, HeartMath and training is used in all. I won't say all. I don't know that for a fact, but many, many, many equine therapy contexts now, and teaching people because horses and dogs, for sure, are great mirrors of our energetic state. So, but anyway, if we can go back to what you originally asked me, that's okay. So we're radiating these fields. Now you had asked, I think you asked me about the global stuff, right?
I did, yes. And I was about to ask you again. Yeah.
So one of our projects we started, I think 2008, is called the Global Coherence Initiative. We have too many global projects now, but so the first, we have a number of tools in our toolbox now for measuring the energetic interconnectivity between us as humans and the Earth, and each other and the Earth's energetic systems. And what I mean by that, this sounds like I'm going New Age or something, but no. So the Earth has, we all know, a magnetic field. We all learned this back in science class, right? The North Pole, South Pole, the geomagnetic field, which is in the geomagnetic field that we all live within is what's called a static field. It's like a refrigerator magnet, it's a pure magnetic field. It's not generated by current flows in the same way. It's a static magnetic field. So, but it is moving. in a way that I didn't even learn until, even as a professional communication engineer, I didn't know what I'm about to tell you. This came later. But anyway, I'll get to that. But so we now have, as part of that project, magnetometers all around the Earth. So we have probably the only time-synchronized, calibrated multi-station system globally that's measuring the...
HeartMath does.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we built and designed and built this and installed it around the world.
Wow.
It was our first tool. We have many more now. So what it's measuring is the Earth's magnetic fields, the vibrations. But wait a minute, Roland, you just said it was a static field. What do you mean vibrations? Well, here's what I didn't know until we put in our system. And there's a technical name for what I'm about to describe, and it's called field line resonances. Okay. All right. So if we time travel back to science class again, remember, Abby, you probably got to dump iron filings on a glass plate. You stick a magnet
just
on it.
full disclosure, I got a D in science.
Okay.
You gotta dumb it down. You gotta dumb it down.
But you know what I'm talking about? You've probably seen examples, right?
Yeah.
You put the magnet and the iron filings show you the shape of the field, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's a bar magnet or a horseshoe or whatever. Well, for those that didn't get a D in science,
I don't know.
Remember that experiment. It's a simple little experiment you can do in grade school. That those iron filings, not only do they show you the shape of the field, but they line up in parallel lines. In presentations, I have an image that's easy to find them. So that simple little experiment is also letting us visualize our magnetic field lines. So the Earth's magnetic field, same way. It's these lines of force, or flux lines are sometimes called. Here's the thing. You can pluck them and they vibrate like a guitar string.
My gosh.
Yeah. So like I said, as a professional communication engineer, I did not know that.
Huh.
But in the geomagnetic research community, it's well known, and there's a name for it, field line resonances. But nobody put the dots together. So what we started, when we looked globally with our system measuring these resonant frequencies, the primary resonant frequency of the vibrating field lines of Earth, which are being plucked by the solar wind.
Oh my gosh.
Right, Earth is turning. You got the solar wind, which travels about 1 million miles per hour on a normal day. It's turning, it's plucking the vibration. They're vibrating. So the frequency, primary resonant frequency, is right around, in frequency language, 0.1 hertz. Okay, so that describes how many cycles in a second. Or in this case, point means less, that it's longer than a second. So it's a 10-second point. 0.1 means one cycle, sine wave vibration every 10 seconds.
Okay.
As a trainer, that should sound really familiar to you.
With the heart coherence.
Heart rhythm coherence, the center of that frequency for humanity. In fact, we just published a paper a few weeks ago of looking at this globally on 1.8 million people, is 0.1 hertz.
Oh my God.
So that takes a little bit to soak in.
It does. That's crazy.
Right. So back to science class, tuning forks. If you didn't do it, you know what most people know, that have seen big demonstrations. 2 tuning forks, tuned to the same frequency. You tap one and it starts to vibrate. The other starts to vibrate with it.
Yeah.
That's demonstrating is what's called resonant coupling, which means that you can transfer energy and information between 2 systems that vibrate at the same frequency.
You can see
That's what I just explained. Earth's vibrating field lines is exactly the same as the human heart rhythm when we're in a coherent state. So when we're in coherence, we're more likely to couple, to exchange energy and information with the global field. Now, there's also a second set of magnetic waves that more people have heard about, and there's just a ton of confusion around. Social media is just crazy sometimes, and those are called Schumann resonances. Yeah. Completely different mechanism, what I just described, in the field line resonances. These are magnetic waves that are bouncing back and forth between the surface of the Earth and the bottom of the ionosphere, which you can think of as a soap bubble around the planet of this layer of plasma. It's a highly ionized layer, a sheath around the planet. And that the ionosphere, this plasma sheath, is like a mirror to magnetic waves. So when magnetic waves get created in this cavity between the Earth and the ionosphere, if they fit the geometry, they amplify and they become what are globally propagating standing waves. That just, in people speak, this means they're everywhere all the time. But there's 8 of them, not just one. And so these were first measured, they're named Schumann resonances because he was a mathematician who predicted their existence. So when they were first experimentally measured in late 1959, 1960, right in there, it's the first time they were ever measured experimentally. The first one frequency is 7.8 hertz, 7.83 hertz to be more precise. It was immediately recognized that that's the same as our alpha rhythm in the human brainwave, or right between theta and alpha. There's 8 of them. We now know all 8 of them overlap with human brainwaves. Okay, so check this out. It's wild. Whether this means anything or not, I don't know, but probably does. Remember I was talking about the heart's 100 times more than the brain, magnetic rhythms. Field line resonances, it's the same ratio, are many times greater than the power of the magnitude of Schumann resonances. They're tiny compared to the field line resonances, the same ratio as heart-brain. So in other words, the heart's magnetic field is huge compared to the brainwave magnetic field. So it's the same thing. At Earth, the magnetic rhythms that overlap with heart are 100 times greater than the magnetic rhythms that overlap with our brainwaves, the Schumann resonances. So, but basically the reason I'm explaining this, it gives at least a basic science understanding through resonant coupling, how all of us humans running around are coupled with the 2 primary rhythm magnetic frequencies or energetic systems of Earth. Heart, brain, right? So we're always coupled to, there's no question that all biological systems, including us, are affected by the rhythms and frequencies in the fields we live in.
Yeah.
I mean, that's well established. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of studies. But what I'm also suggesting, and I'm not the first to suggest this, but is that it's a 2-way system that's bidirectional. We're also feeding information into the fields collectively. Right?
Which is a little scary in this time and day and age.
Well, yeah, but it's also great. And then this gets into other tools in our toolbox that we probably don't have time to go into today, but that where we're kind of able to measure. You kind of think of the collective field as a field of consciousness. So another one of our projects is called the Global Consciousness Project 2.0. So we're here a lot of 30 years of history now. And we took this over from Dr. Roger Nelson, who founded the project at Princeton close to 30 years ago, and who retired for real now and really asked if we would take it over. And so we've built a completely new version of it. So these are, the statistics on it are astronomical, over 1 trillion odds against chance that when something happens, that usually a big media, whether it's a terrorist attack or a large organized meditation or something like that synchronizes people's emotions, see something and we go, or more, it evokes love and compassion, that it creates the simple way to think of it of waves in this field I'm describing that these devices pick up in a correlated way. So we're actually able to see the effects now in the collective consciousness field.
Wow.
In a pretty scientifically validated way now with pretty very convincing statistics.
So all the more urgency around helping us all feel more love and compassion.
Yeah, when we add more love and compassion, I mean, we do organize, events and meditations to help pulse the global field with love and compassion. But just being, as you go through your daily life, anybody's listening, acts of kindness, right? Extending compassionate latitude when somebody does something you don't like, because we really don't know what their life is like and where they're coming from.
Right.
So being kinder, loving, caring, right, appreciative, it matters, because it's not just what are we feeding the field, it's understanding what we feed the field matters in very real, measurable ways.
I love that, because I think that a lot of times I listen to people and they get so frustrated and concerned and they're very caught up in, well, what can I do? What can I do? And it feels sometimes that like complaining is doing something. But actually, it's kind of the opposite.
It's the opposite.
Be loved,
it is the opposite.
And that is doing something.
Yeah, and that's hard to do because, a lot of times, when we have an intention or we want to send love or compassion to someone, right? What I would suggest is I'm going to send them, we do this all the time around here, love and compassion for the highest, best outcome. Add for the highest,
whatever
best
it
outcome.
is.
Because the mind wants to think it knows.
Exactly.
And we really don't know what the highest best outcome is. We really don't know what's the best use of that energy.
Yeah.
For the balancing on multiple levels.
I love that you're saying that, because I really feel like that's such a hook. It's like, and again, it goes back to that mind thing where we think we know what's best. So we're sending love and compassion, but there's a part of the mind that's like, for this to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And then look over our shoulder to see if it happened or not.
Right. Exactly.
So, I'm serious, but that's just the mind,
Yeah.
Oh, it didn't work because they didn't get healed.
Right.
Well, who knows? One of the things I learned from Doc Children many years ago, and it's so important to really understand, love is never wasted.
Bruce Cryer said that to me.
Yeah, well, he got it from Doc.
That's where he got it from. Yeah. And I was like, oh, that is the greatest. Like, that is awesome. Like, that should be like a sticky note on all of our computers. It's never wasted. You can't go wrong. And now we've just heard about all the scientific reasons why not only are you not going wrong, but it really isn't being wasted. So, Rollin, before I let you go, if there's one thing that you could let people know, like if there's one thing that if you could just shake people and be like, I just want them all to know this thing. What is that one thing that you?
Well, I kind of already said it, and the straightest line path to our own personal evolution and the evolution of humanity is love. Breathe love and do it. Practice it as often as you can.
Thank you. Yeah, that's awesome. And I love having this interview because you're so scientific. There's no.
I went into a lot of stuff I couldn't necessarily prove, but I would challenge anybody to disprove.
Yeah. So. Yeah, you gave us a lot to think about, and I really appreciate your time, despite my being late for it. And your being here today. Thanks so much.
Well, it was my pleasure. It was fun. I mean, how could I not talk about intuition and the intuition incubator?